Welcome to the Business Channel. I'm Lohit Kalburgi, and today I'm in conversation with Miles Keeping from GVA Grimley. How important is sustainability to your clients?
It's increasingly important. A few years ago, sustainability was a new concept as far as the property world was concerned, although it's been an important part of the planning process for some time. Many organisations, customers requiring, for example, their suppliers of services and goods to demonstrate greener credentials. We find this ourselves as an organisation. We've recently been accredited to ISO 14001, which is an environmental management system internationally recognised. And one of the key drivers for us in doing that was because our clients were saying to us, we're trying to do good things environmentally, what are you doing about that? If you occupy a green building, we would argue at GVA Grimley, what you're doing is you're occupying efficient space in an efficient manner. Your costs should be lower if you occupy that sort of space, and these days particularly, that's a really important driver.
Miles, some people say that green is just the new black. It's very trendy, and everyone wants a piece of being green, being sustainable. But tell me about how companies can actually use being green, being sustainable, towards making a real difference to their bottom line.
Yeah, well, green may well be the new black for many people and many organisations. And it's important to recognise that some organisations get involved in green activities and being green because they want to be seen to be green. And sometimes there's not much substance actually behind their presentation of how they want to be perceived to be as green. But there are real bottom line benefits that should and can certainly arise because of investing in green technologies, for example. I think for most organisations, though, it's actually about behaviours. And sometimes this sounds a little bit unsexy because it's not about green technologies or kit or bling, which a lot of us really quite like, but actually it's about how you live your daily life as an individual, and when you get to the workplace, it's about how you try to occupy premises in a low carbon manner. One of the challenges that I face as a consultant working with people in the property arena has very often been around the issue of how cheap energy is. So, for example, if I go to an organisation and say, we can help you to be more energy efficient and it will take a little bit of investment in capital in the first instance, very often the response from someone with a financial director's position or other sort of position is, well, let me see where that is on my list of priorities. Energy cost, actually, it's a long way down that list of priorities. So actually, I'm not going to place too much emphasis on that. What we're beginning to see, however, is a whole range of other bottom line benefits coming through. And what we will see increasingly, partly because of changes in regulation, CRC, Energy Efficiency Scheme, is one such regulatory measure.
Miles, if I'm a finance director for a property development firm and I'm expected to make an investment to turn my company to being more green or more sustainable, how quickly in general can I expect to see a return on my investment?
That's quite a complex issue. We find for many property development companies and other property companies, or companies involved in other aspects of the property life cycle, have very different business models. Typically for a property developer, there are a number of key issues that I would say to the financial director in this kind of conversation. One thing is there are things that can occur in terms of immediate bottom line benefits. The low-hanging fruit, are you occupying your own premises in a carbon efficient manner, for example, to reduce your energy bills? That's good housekeeping, and that's where we'd start with some very obvious efficiencies that can be made there. As far as they and their business and their product is concerned, new buildings or refurbished buildings, there are a lot of drivers in the marketplace which suggest that greener buildings are far more valuable, and therefore bottom line and top line benefits are going to flow to the company quite quickly. But actually what we have seen in the marketplace, and I can think of any number of developers and landlords who'll give us, back this up, when they say that a greener building is one which lets more quickly. So occupiers are easier to find, which means that the void cost, the empty building cost of that building will be diminished. The marketing costs for that building will be diminished as well. So again, there are real savings there. What we're also seeing is that actually that rental growth prospects for commercial buildings are significantly better greener buildings than for non-green buildings. That's largely because the pool of organisations who are increasingly demanding greener buildings for properties is growing over time. Partly relating to regulations, it's a lot easier to get planning permission for a building if you can demonstrate that it's got really strong green credentials. Increasingly local authorities, some of whom are our clients and we act for, and we encourage them to adopt such policies, require very high environmental assessment ratings for buildings before planning permission is granted.
Miles, I was reading on your website that you've recently released a report called the Green to Gold report. And one thing that I found really interesting was that new buildings are only coming onto the market at, I think, a rate of 1 to 2%.
That's right.
But the key focus at the moment is actually on green refurbishments. So if I own a property at the moment and I'm interested in refurbishing it to a green standard, how green is green?
Yeah, that's kind of $1 million question, almost literally $1 million question. Property owners can spend an awful lot of money in greening up a property if they want to do so, or they can take a rather more pragmatic view, which is the one that I would encourage, certainly in the current economic circumstances, where you try and maximise what you get for your spend. There are all sorts of technologies, as I say, which are very expensive and provide some carbon benefit as far as the building is concerned. But building owners needn't go down that route unless they want to. Some are doing that, and we wouldn't discourage them from doing so. But the low-hanging fruit, the really easy wins, are actually very obvious ones. They're about trying to make the building actually more efficient in terms of its thermal efficiency, how well insulated it is, for example, before you start going out and investing in all sorts of interesting bits of kit and renewable technology. If you do want to invest in technologies, there are some really, really cost-efficient technologies which actually are very helpful in identifying where cost is being wasted, and payback periods can be very short. I can think of organisations, for example, who've undertaken some really, really straightforward and some simple activities and reduced their carbon and cost inefficiencies very quickly with a payback period of months, not even into the years. For some organisations, when they've sorted out their behaviours, when they've dealt with those sorts of quick wins, then sometimes, yes, there is a requirement to seek cost spending in order to seek carbon efficiency. But what we're also seeing coming from government now is more maturity in terms of policy as far as incentives are concerned. So there are new incentives, for example, to enable organisations, whether they be public or private organisations, to invest in green technologies.
Is there a cost implication to make behavioural changes?
There can be for many organisations, but there needn't be for other organisations. Sometimes companies will come to us and say, well, we have this agenda to reduce our carbon impact. What can we do? Do we need to invest money in all sorts of technologies and to refurbish the building? And as I often say to them, let's start by looking at your behaviours and getting the quick wins. So sometimes, yes, the organisations are paying us to advise them on how to occupy premises. It's not their core business, it is ours, and that's why they've come to us. But in many instances, actually, we find that we get approached by landlords, particularly under the CRC Energy Efficiency Scheme regulations, and because of those, who go to their tenant organisations and say, it would be very helpful for us, for cost purposes, for the landlord, if the occupier could reduce their energy consumption. Now, our company, GVA Grimley, has a very strong, very large property management function within the business, which is growing very rapidly. And a lot of our clients come to us and say, how can you help us to make our buildings more efficient? And that will often involve me and colleagues of mine throughout the business across the country going to our landlords' occupiers and advising them about how to occupy their buildings in a more low carbon, more generally energy and environmentally efficient manner.
And in summary, Miles, what other services does GVA Grimley offer its clients?
GVA Grimley offers a whole range of property life cycle advice. We would argue that sustainability is absolutely integral to every aspect and element of the property life cycle, whether that's the procurement of new property, the ownership of existing buildings, the occupancy of buildings, or the regulation of buildings. If you aren't attending to the whole of the property life cycle as far as your organisation is concerned, if you aren't attending to sustainability within all of your property decision making and the actions that flow from that decision making, then we would argue you're not being an efficient organisation.
Thank you for joining us, Miles, at the Business Channel.
Thanks very much.